I think I'm coming to understand something about myself, and it's kind of incredible to me how I have reacted to this tonight and also in recent times more broadly, in comparison to other times in the past. What exactly am I referring to? I've talked a lot on this channel about how the time when I'm supposed to be going to bed is like the hardest time, not just in the night, but in the day. Like, any time when I have to be awake, the time when I am going to sleep is by far the hardest part. Either because I am replaying every single negative memory I've ever had, like in vivid detail, or I'm reliving every embarrassing moment I've had. I also end up going over the conversations I've had with close friends or significant others I've had, or ones that I currently have. I don't know why I said plural there, it's just one. But um, I had a moment where I was laying down here for sleep, and I thought of something my girlfriend told me, that when we were actually talking to each other, I responded to very politely. Like, um, she just, I think, misinterpreted something I said, or perhaps projected her own experiences onto me. And I set the record straight and just, you know, told her why that was inaccurate. Pretty plain and civil, nothing abnormal about it. But I think maybe a part of me that maybe I was unaware at the time because it did not outwardly affect my behavior. Maybe I was unaware of like a small wound I had incurred to my ego when she had just suggested this. Like, even the mere insinuation, I think, aroused some anger or frustration in me. But it didn't come out in how I initially responded, or at all in that conversation, because the conversation was very sweet and amicable. But I laid down to go to bed, and I've been laying down for the last couple hours trying to get to sleep, and the same thing happened to me. That's happened to me so many times when I've been trying to get to sleep, where I have this vivid recall of the conversation, and I'm going over it over and over and over. And as I do, it's like I gradually get more angry about this perceived slight that she's made against me, when really all she did was like suggest that I could have had a weakness in that moment. Perhaps not even more broadly. Like, perhaps it wouldn't have even been, a broader trend in my character. Even just suggesting in that moment that I would exhibit a behavior that I seemed so uncomfortable with having ascribed to me when I thought about it like that was like this huge deal to me based on how I was reacting. But the reality is, it's not a big deal. And the reason why I did not do what I've done to other people who have been friends of mine or people I've dated, where I'll be stuck awake thinking about this stuff, then I'll just blow up their DMs with these like really angry messages. The reason I didn't do that was because I actually spent time thinking about it instead of acting. Like, I I derived the strength from our bond and from how much I want to be with her and how much I want this thing to work, and also the lessons that I've learned from my past mistakes in relationships, I derived that strength from all those things to acknowledge that I had a fragile ego in that moment. This was my own fragility talking. It wasn't any indication of malice or even a mistake on her end. It was merely an indication of my own fragility. And I would not have had that strength to acknowledge that I was being fragile and egotistical, insecure in the past when the exact same type of things happened. But I realized this, and then what I realized afterwards is, well, I have to take responsibility for that. My feelings are my own, and the way that I respond to them, i.e., the way I behave in response to them, are also actions of my own, and therefore fall under the broad category of my responsibility. This is all my responsibility. It's not hers or anybody else's, and I can't blame anyone else for the fact that I feel that way, or the fact that this psychological problem exists, or the fact that, you know, in the past I've behaved wrongfully in response to all this. The only person who's responsible there is me. And as someone who is responsible, I have to acknowledge my role there and prevent future behavior that would be problematic, that would be unfair to the people around me that I care about, namely her. And so, once I acknowledged my responsibility and also the fact that I was being kind of fragile there with my ego, I was able to not make that mistake that I've made so many times with other people where I just blow up their DMs with all this incendiary nonsense. It's like, it's just so unnecessary. Like, who does it help to get angry like that and then spout all of this nonsense? Literally nobody. It doesn't help me because it doesn't ameliorate the feelings. It doesn't address the core fundamental problem. And even if she did do something wrong, which is a big if, she clearly did not, how would that help her? Like, I don't think punishing people is a good method to uh, instill behavior changes. The way that you instill behavior changes is by being understanding and kind, perhaps, providing rewards or incentives for certain behaviors. It's by humanizing someone and also by humbling yourself. It's not by being angry and egotistical. That's just going to drive people away from you. It doesn't help anyone. So I came to recognize all this, and as I did, as I worked through all this in my head, I felt a lot more calm and a lot more at peace. I think in the past, when I was in similar situations to this, I would feel like I had to rein myself in, like I had to violently hold myself back. Like there was this caged animal inside of me that I was just desperately trying to hold down to prevent from breaking free and causing a bunch of problems. That's how it felt all the time. And it felt like a Herculean task exerting that much control over myself all the time because it felt like, all I was ever doing was reining this thing in and not saying, like, you know, even 10% of the horrible things that I was thinking of saying and doing all the time. I never feel like that with her, ever. And I think the reason is because, well, for one, I actually love her. And I did not actually love those other people I was with in the past. The feelings were more something akin to infatuation or obsession. Um, they were dehumanizing the feelings that I had for those folks. But also, um, I think I I think I did not address the core problem. You know, I I didn't have a sturdy enough conception of reality. I did not have my feet planted in reality. And so I wasn't able to like acknowledge things and stick to it. I would, tacitly acknowledge stuff, but not really, and then flip-flop and, be generally unstable. Um, and that's assuming I acknowledged anything at all. Most of the time, I would just post hoc rationalize everything. And um, if I didn't do that, I just did not understand what was going on. Like, I seemed to be, like, terrified of how little I understood about myself and the situation I was in. But now, as I've gotten off those god awful hormones I was on at the time that just made a 180 in my personality, like 360 spin, like turned me into a really awful person. Um, in addition to that, I've also just become a lot more cognizant of my feelings and the world around me and others. That's what getting more experience is going to do if you allow yourself to learn from it. And so now I'm able to look at these initial feelings and trace the root of them and acknowledge my responsibility and actually admit my faults. And when I do that, when I'm able to like logically explain it and trace the trajectory, the feelings actually go away. Like, I don't actually feel angry or frustrated or anything like that anymore once I do that. And then I just, feel like I can work on the stuff and like I'm in love. But yeah, all of that is derived from gratitude and appreciation. I think the strength of the bond will ultimately yield a result that will look like, humanizing uh, and being a loyal and good person. You're much more likely to adhere to your principles if you know how to. That's where experience and learning from one's mistakes comes in. But also, if you have motivation to adhere to your principles, like, I got some pretty damn good motivation there. And in the past, I didn't. So, I think that's a huge component to this that's, like, impossible to overlook.